All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to explore a really powerful idea: how the ancient Islamic concept of migration, or Hijra, might just offer us an ethical roadmap for the crazy interconnected crises we're all facing. But to really get why this ancient idea feels so urgent right now, we have to start with a single, absolutely staggering number.
13 million. That's the number of people displaced by the conflict in Sudan. Just Sudan. It's a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around, but it's also just one symptom of a much bigger, much more tangled global problem.
And that problem has a name: the polycrisis. Think of it like this. Things like climate change, the rise of authoritarian governments, and economic turmoil aren't just separate fires burning in different places. Nope. They're colliding, feeding off each other, and creating this superstorm that demands we find new ways, or maybe very old ways, to think about the world.
So, where do we even start? Well, our source material suggests we look to a foundational concept in Islam: Hijra. The whole argument is that we need to stop thinking about it as just a one-time event that happened centuries ago, and instead see it as a living, breathing, ethical principle for our world today.
So what does Hijra actually mean in this context? It's not just about moving from point A to point B. It's an ethical duty. It's this active response to injustice. It's about having to leave a place of persecution or a collapsing environment to find somewhere, anywhere, that human dignity can actually survive and maybe even thrive.
Now, this idea really shakes up a more traditional worldview that basically split the globe into two neat zones: the abode of Islam and the abode of war. But in our messy world of polycrisis, where an Islamic state can be incredibly violent and a non-Muslim country can offer safety and justice, that black and white map just doesn't work anymore.
So if the old map is gone, what do we use instead? Well, the new understanding actually comes from the life of the Prophet Muhammad himself, which gives us two very different models for Hijra, two distinct blueprints, you could say, for how to find safety and build a new community.
And here they are, side by side. First, you have the Abyssinian model. Here, the number one priority was just safety and justice. Period. It was about escaping persecution and finding refuge in a land ruled by a fair, non-Muslim king. Then you have the Medina model. This was totally different. It wasn't just about seeking refuge. It was an invitation to come and govern, to build a brand new, pluralistic society from the ground up.
What's so crucial about that Abyssinian model is the reasoning behind it. Just look at this quote. The prophet didn't say, "Go there because the king shares our faith." He said, "Go there because the king is just." The single most important quality of that land was justice, or adl. That was the deciding factor.
And this is a huge deal theologically. That migration to Abyssinia basically creates the precedent for a third category, the Dar el-Am, the abode of safety. It suggests that any land that guarantees safety and justice is a legitimate, maybe even a preferable place to live, no matter who's in charge.
Okay, that's the historical foundation. But how does this framework actually help us make sense of the messes we're in right now? Let's bring this into the 21st century.
Here's where the source material makes a really provocative argument. It suggests that when an authoritarian nation-state demands your absolute, unquestioning loyalty, placing itself where God should be, it's committing a form of shirk or idolatry. And if you look at it that way, leaving that state isn't betrayal, it's an act of spiritual survival.
And we see these heartbreaking examples everywhere. The Rohingya are pushed into a forced hijra to escape a genocide. The situation in Sudan shows us that just calling a state Islamic guarantees nothing about safety. And now, a totally new form of hijra is emerging, born out of the climate crisis.
And that brings us to this idea of Eco-Hijrah. It's a really interesting concept because it works on two levels. On the one hand, it's the very real physical migration of people whose homes are becoming unlivable. But on a deeper spiritual level, it's a call for all of us to migrate away from the consumerist lifestyles that are fueling this crisis to begin with.
So getting through this polycrisis means we have to reorder our ethical priorities. In Islamic law, there's this framework of higher objectives, the maqasid al-sharia. And the argument here is that in a time of crisis, the most fundamental objective of all, the preservation of life itself, or hifz al-nafs, has to come first. I mean, it makes sense, right? You can't preserve religion without first preserving the people who practice it.
But this whole thing isn't just about the person on the move. The idea of Hijra creates a powerful, corresponding duty for those who are in a position to help. It begs the question, what do we owe people who are seeking sanctuary?
And for that answer, we go back to that second blueprint, the Medina model.
The people of Medina who welcomed the migrants were called the Ansar, the helpers, and their approach wasn't charity, it wasn't refugee camps, it was something so much deeper. It was structural integration, pairing up families, sharing homes and work to literally weave two communities into one. It's an incredible blueprint for what a real welcome can look like.
And this ethical duty to help? It's universal. This verse from the Quran is crystal clear. The duty to give someone sanctuary is based on their vulnerability, not their belief system. It even applies to non-believers who ask for protection. The principle is about our shared humanity, not a shared creed.
Which leaves us with this final, really challenging question. In a world of rising tyranny and climate breakdown, where staying home might mean enabling injustice or simply not surviving, could the act of leaving, the act of Hijra, be one of the deepest expressions of faith you can make? A courageous choice to save not just your life, but the very dignity and values that make life worth living.